You know, this is probably the least sexiest subject I ever talk about. It's something no one wants to talk about. I usually talk about the future of Judaism and real sexy stuff like that. And somehow I got involved with this cause through my very good dear friend and partner, Rob, who's had a sort of a close connection with this cause for years. And one day he said, come to lunch. So we went to lunch and we met these people who really, really care about this cause. So we got involved with it. And like I said, it's not something people like to talk about. But the more I got into this cause, the more I realized it's one of the most important ones. And the reason we wanted to come to the rabbis' retreat is because rabbis, more than perhaps any constituency, have a direct connection with Jewish couples who are about to get married, who are thinking of having children, and so forth. And Rabbi Rick Jacobs spoke really eloquently. And one of the things he said was to enlarge the circle of our communities because so many Jews are outside our walls. Right? And we think that part of this enlarging of our circle is to care about physical health for rabbis. That it's not just about spiritual health, that physical health should play an important role. So this is not going to be a scientific meeting. We're going to have the science here on a video screen, which is from the director of Gene Test Now, who had to be in San Francisco today, but we filmed her just for this. So we're going to play that, and then Rob, if you want to add some introductory comments.
Just the way this started is Sharon called me and said that she wanted to do something about genetic screening in Los Angeles. Most other Jewish communities have major genetic screening initiatives. New York, Philadelphia, Miami, even Birmingham, Alabama. LA, for reasons that are probably unique to LA, has never had a genetic screening initiative in the Jewish community, like a sustained genetic screening program, even though we have the second largest number of Jews in America. So through Sharon, the Factor Family Foundation, the Doris Factor Foundation, we created something called Gene Test Now, which is a marketing and web organization to get the word out, to get people to just get screened. The reason rabbis are important.
You might have seen this in the Jewish Journal.
Yeah. So David and his team came up with these great series of ads, which have been all over. We developed the website. We're now hired our first executive director. So finally, LA has a genetic screening program. The reason rabbis are important, like David said, is because when people get married, they often go to the rabbi first, even if they aren't, deeply tied to the Jewish community. The other important point to remember, especially for rabbis, is that it's important to get screened if you think you have any Jewish blood. It's not just about only 2 Jews need to get screened. It's somebody who's Jewish and marrying somebody who's half Jewish. It decreases your chances of passing on a genetic disease, but you still have that chance. So it's really important. People say, well, I'm not really Jewish, so I don't need to get screened. Well, you do if you've got a parent who's if you've got an ancestor who's Jewish, or if you're not even sure, you need to get screened. So anybody who comes to you is...
And if you're Sephardic, and if you're Persian.
And if they're Persian.
It used to be...
David said it's not sexy, but actually it's all about sex. It's just a sexy part of sex. And it has to be part of any conversation when people are getting married, when people are thinking of having kids. And not just the first time they're having kids, as Callie will tell you, but every time. Because there's new tests that come up, new screens, new diseases, so you need to get screened every time you're thinking of having a child.
And every time I bring up this cause, somebody thinks back of a personal moment when they go into a house and they see one of the children, with 24-hour care, that's going to be like that for 50 years, and that completely sucks up the energy of the parents who dearly love them. Because this is not about love. The parents I know of kids who were born with genetic diseases are madly in love with them. This is about prevention. This is about having healthy Jewish babies. And it's as simple as that. It's about prevention. We succeed when there's no bad news. That's when we succeed. And the medical advances, it used to be we Tay-Sachs and Tay-Sachs, right? But the medical advances have gone so far that there are a whole bunch of other diseases that are in play right now. And most importantly, because this is one of the reasons people don't like to talk about it, They said, well, if there's bad news, I'm going to have to divorce this woman I love. I'm going to have to divorce this man that I love. I don't want to hear that. So the good news is that you can have healthy babies. There are options right now in terms of you want to stay married. So I hope this works. I tested it earlier.
Do you tilt a little this way, please?
They're a gene test now, and I'm also a genetic counselor. I've been doing clinical genetics for over 7 years and have worked at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, USC Norris Cancer Center, and Providence St. Joseph Hospital. I want to talk to you today about Gene Test Now and the importance of speaking to young Jewish couples about testing for recessive conditions that are common within the Jewish population. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you in person today. At Gene Test Now, our vision is to have all Jewish individuals within the Los Angeles community who are considering having children be aware of their carrier status for common and severe recessive conditions. To illustrate why this is important, I'd like to tell you about Josh and Rachel. Josh met Rachel in college when both were in their freshman year, and the two were inseparable ever since. 2 years after graduating college, when both were feeling established in their careers, Josh proposed to Rachel and she accepted. The following year, Rachel gave birth to Ethan, a sweet and happy baby. When Ethan was 3 months, he developed seizures and had difficulty feeding. After they visited several doctors, they learned that Ethan had a condition called Canavan syndrome, which is a hereditary disorder passed on by both Josh and Rachel. Josh and Rachel were obviously devastated to hear this, and also very surprised, since neither one had ever heard of Canavan disease in their families. Ethan's development slowed. He was never able to sit up or walk on his own or speak, and eventually he lost his vision. Tragically, he passed away when he was only 3.5. This situation is absolutely preventable, and this is why our organization exists. We want to ensure that young Jewish couples learn of their disease carrier status before having children, so that the odds are on their side to have healthy babies. 1 in 5 Jewish individuals is a carrier for a common, recessive, preventable disease. 1 in 5. This is so common, yet most Jewish individuals have no idea. This is why the role of leaders in the Jewish community is so important in getting the word out. You would never know that you're a carrier for a recessive condition unless you are screened or have a child with the condition. You don't have to have any family history at all. This is why it is so important to get screened. Carriers for a recessive condition do not show any signs of the disease. They are usually completely unaffected and will never be diagnosed with the condition. Recessive diseases must be inherited from both parents. You can see here how this works. A mom and a dad are both carriers for the same recessive condition. We can use Canavan disease as an example. Here, the little letter R is the gene change that causes the recessive condition. Both parents only have one little r and one big R version of the gene, which does not cause the disease. Each time they have a child, there's a 50-50 chance of them each passing on the big R gene version versus the little r gene version. Therefore, each time they have a child, there's a 25% chance that the baby will inherit both the big R's and then not even be a carrier for the disease. There's a 50% chance that the baby will be an unaffected carrier, just like each parent. And there's a 25% chance that the baby will inherit both little r gene versions and will then be affected with Canavan disease, which is represented here in red. This is what happened with Rachel and Josh. Both didn't know that they were carriers, and Ethan inherited both copies of the Canavan disease gene version from each parent. This is how a healthy couple with no family history of Canavan disease had a son with the condition. Besides Canavan disease, there are other common recessive diseases in the Jewish population. Within Ashkenazi Jews, there are 19 common recessive conditions for which we recommend testing. These diseases cause a variety of symptoms, but all are severe and life-changing, many leading to shortened lifespan and severe morbidity. For example, cystic fibrosis involves severe mucus buildup in the lungs and intestinal tract. This leads to clogged airways, inflammation, and frequent infections. It can also lead to poor growth and malnutrition, diabetes, infertility, and shortened lifespan. 1 in 25 Caucasians, including Jews, are carriers for this condition. Infants with Tay-Sachs disease develop normally for about the first 6 months, and then they begin to deteriorate mentally and physically, leading to blindness, deafness, inability to swallow, paralysis, and usually death by age 4. 1 in 25 Ashkenazi Jews carries this condition. Familial dysautonomia is a disease of the autonomic nervous system. It causes insensitivity to pain, inability to produce tears, unstable blood pressure, abnormal temperature perception, poor muscle tone, and some developmental delay. Intelligence is usually normal, but individuals with the condition have a shortened lifespan. 1 in 30 Ashkenazi Jews is a carrier. Spinal muscular atrophy causes progressive muscle weakness, poor muscle tone, respiratory problems, and difficulty sitting, standing, and walking. It can also cause shortened life expectancy. 1 in 41 Ashkenazi Jews is a carrier. Also, 1 in 10 Egyptian Jews carries this condition, and in just the general Caucasian population, 1 in 47 is a carrier. Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews have their own different conditions for which they have a higher carrier frequency. This table here outlines some of the conditions, and in which Jewish populations they are most common. Beta thalassemia, for example, is a condition that is common in both Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews. Up to 1 in 5 are carriers. This condition can cause severe anemia, enlargement of the spleen, feeding problems, diarrhea, fever, and early death if left untreated. Treatment is available with transfusions. Hereditary inclusion body myopathy is a recessive condition common in Persian Jews, with up to 1 in 10 carrying the condition. Onset usually is in the 20s, and affected individuals develop weakness in the legs, with difficulty walking and loss of balance. Arms and hands also become weak, and as the condition progresses, affected individuals lose the ability to walk. Familial Mediterranean fever is common in Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews, with up to 1 in 3 carrying the condition. This condition causes frequent episodes of fever and inflammation, with abdominal, chest, and joint pain that can last for days. It can lead to kidney failure. There is treatment for this condition as well. You can find out more about these diseases on the Gene Test Now website. Screening for these conditions is very simple. It involves a blood test, which is then sent off to the lab, where they look at the person's genes to determine if they carry any of these conditions. Results are then reviewed with a genetic counselor or physician who can advise as to related risks and options. Remember, both members of the couple have to be carriers for the same recessive condition in order for there to be risk to their children. If each member of the couple carries a different recessive condition, there is no risk to their children. If both members of the couple are carriers for the same recessive condition, there are options to ensure that they have healthy children. It all starts with knowing your carrier status. Thank you for your time. Please check out our website and share it with young Jewish couples, encouraging them to pursue testing. Also, please feel free to contact me with any questions at tallyg@genetestnow.com. Hi, I'm Tali Geba, Director of Gene Test Now, and I'm also... Hi.
All right. So you got all the good news?
Yeah, actually, what she said her website was.
genetestnow.com.
Okay. And
We're gonna have some
It's
handouts.
Tali up there, but she said Tali G.
Or actually,
That's her email.
Tally G is her email.
Yeah,
She's not like a rocker or anything. Tali G.
Sharon.
I'm Sharon Glazer, and part of the co-founding team with Gene Test Now.
She's being modest.
Anyhow, I wanted to really mention that many Jewish couples really feel that they should intermarry. Why should they address this issue? And that's not so simple, because the general population has many genetic diseases that crop up. So in counseling couples, that are intermarrying, they have to be encouraged to test because they can have the same problems in other ways. So if you want to embellish that.
I have a list of questions. First is, are there, you talk about options to have healthy children. Are there options other than abortion? What options do you offer?
In vitro.
In
Yeah,
vitro?
they could fertilize the eggs outside of with getting the right, checking the sperm
So
before,
do
and
in
the
vitro
egg before.
fertilization, check the
Right.
offspring and then either implant or not
Right,
implant,
right.
depending on the
Okay.
outcome.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Do you have,
By the way, in Israel, that's free. Here, it's expensive.
so do you have a handout that I could give to a married couple and say, you should know this?
The best thing is to get on the website. We have, give you this. Everything is on the website. We spend a tremendous amount of time and energy and resources on the website because there's no handout that's going to be able to answer all the questions. So if you go on genetestnow.com, we make sure to have a really easy address that people can remember. So genetestnow.com, they'll have all the information, and they'll also be able to have personal questions with Hallie. So really,
And
just
especially for this generation, you give them paper, they've never seen paper before, but you tell them to go to a website, they're content, they could go
yeah,
right on their
they
phone.
don't do paper anymore.
And the website is iPhone compatible, friendly, so they can go right
Right.
there, right in front of you and get on there.
And you can even show it to them on the spot, on your iPad, iPhone, or laptop you have.
Yeah.
I want to ask a question. I'm going back, 10 years, so I need you to kind of update me. There was a lot of concern that once we found out genetic information, that would be open to employers, that might result in not getting hired if we found that we had certain medical conditions, that insurance companies would drop us. How has that changed in the last number of years, or how do we respond to that issue today? Do you know?
The way they archive the information is all secure. Tali's gone into that with us, but part of getting tested is knowing where your test results reside for the foreseeable future. And so the labs that do the testing also have security measures in place. And they're not, they can't be subpoenaed or anything like that.
So is that still a fear? I'm thinking, you come out of the world of journalism, that was my background years ago too. You've probably seen that issue over, the last decade or so be an issue of concern that
Yeah, I think it's
was.
a legitimate concern, but believe me, the downside of having a kid with any of these things.
Got
is
The,
not-
the biggest concern that I've seen is people just don't want to know.
Right.
Or they think it won't happen to them.
Yeah.
And, very smart people, very sophisticated people just think, well, what are the odds? It can't happen to me. Or they think I'm only half Jewish, so I'm not, or I don't practice,
Right. And they
You
see,
hear that, it's like, and the other thing that's really key in college, and this is on the website, is you need to get a blood test. There's this group called 23andMe that does it's not the same. This is 19 genetic diseases specific to the Jewish population. They're not tested for at 23andMe. You need a blood test to test for Tay-Sachs. There's a Tay-Sachs enzyme that can be detected in saliva, but there's one that can be detected in blood. It can't be detected in saliva. And if your lottery number comes up and you get that, it's bad news. So you need a blood test.
and also people see a lot of healthy babies being born. They see in their families 20 healthy babies were born. Everywhere they go, they see healthy babies. So if you have, God forbid, an unhealthy baby, well, it's just a question of bad luck. But medicine is so advanced, and they take care of the pregnancy and so forth, and they get to see inside. That's going to make sure I have a healthy baby. And I don't smoke, and I don't do blah, blah, blah. So there's a sense that medicine is already taking care of me. And the way they deliver now, it's not like stillborn, like when my grandparents in Morocco, it was very common for a baby to die at birth. But that's not because of a genetic disease, just because of medicine. And now, so there's a sense that it's just bad luck, and there's nothing I can do about it.
David, you want to talk about the letter, the rabbi's letter?
Oh yeah. Let's see. So what we're thinking of doing, which we will do, is on the Rosh Hashanah issue of the Jewish Journal. We are hoping to get as many of the rabbis of our community together and to endorse this statement. An open letter to the Jewish community from your local rabbis on the importance of gene testing. There are subjects that are difficult to talk about. Genetic disease is one of them. Unfortunately, genetic diseases occur with high frequency in the Jewish population. As rabbis, we are concerned about the complete health of our communities, spiritual as well as physical. So we feel obligated to bring up this difficult subject. We believe quite simply that gene testing is a must for everyone who is thinking of having children. Why? Because it will improve the odds that you will have healthy children. And that alone is good enough for us. There is a new website called genetestnow.com that will guide you through the basics of gene testing. Genetestnow.com is a free, locally based nonprofit founded by concerned members of our community. Through the website, you can also ask any questions you might have and receive a personal answer. Genetic screening is a lot simpler and easier than people think. For couples with any Jewish ancestry, screening for any of more than 19 possible genetic diseases is imperative. And thanks to medical advances, should the testing indicate a risk of disease, you now have many good options to have a healthy baby. Please educate yourselves on this important subject and speak to your doctor about it. As difficult as it is to talk about this, it's even more difficult not to. Wishing you a sweet, happy, and healthy New Year. So we are, our goal is to have as many rabbis sign on to this statement. We already have one here today who's signing on, Rabbi Talk from by Jacob, Rabbi Eddie Feinstein is signed on, and there are two that we've asked. So we're 2 for 2 already. 3 for 3.
I'll sign. My own experience with genetic testing is from a dominant hereditary disease, Huntington's disease, which my late wife died of, and my children actually, fortunately all 3 have the gene. And they actually have gone through the in vitro testing, non in vitro, none of the implantations were successful, so they've adopted a baby. But I'm interested much more broadly in the subject of genetic testing. As you know, 23andMe, I've had that test. My wife has had that test. I was curious about whether it identifies these genes. And I'm also curious if you have a couple with a Jew and a non-Jew. Is this important to raise with such a couple?
There's a book out now by a beautiful writer named Emily Rapp. I mean, I know that you're all here for sermon material because I know this day really well because I've lived through this day for 20 years. And if you don't come home with about 10 great sermon ideas, the anxiety level in the house goes up even higher. So if you're looking for sermon material, one is this beautiful book by Emily Rapp. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name. It's R-A-P-P. Who is Irish Catholic and married a Jewish guy and didn't get tested. And it turns out the largest incidence of Tay-Sachs in the world right now is in the Irish Catholic community because Jews get tested, but she didn't know. So they didn't get tested. Their son has Tay-Sachs. He died 2 years ago. She wrote this book, which has been on NPR, and it's really beautiful. But this is really about the obligations of love, not just the fun and the beauty and all that stuff, but really about what does love require us beyond just.
And is there a simple answer as to where do you go to get a test and what does it cost? And
all that's on the website.
Okay.
And the answers are fairly simple. Sure.
Jerry.
I know.
I was much moved by the presentation of 23andMe at the CCAR convention. It really seemed, as she was, well, I don't want to, it doesn't matter how she was pitching it, but I was quite interested and moved on it, and I went to my own congregation, where I'm not the rabbi, and all of a sudden the brakes went on. Now I'm at Leobek Temple, than which there are no more progressive synagogues, one would think. But it was just, Ken Chasen urged me, go slow on this, we're not sure yet, that may lead to, what is it that, I didn't pursue it because there's 25 other things on my agenda, but what is it that blocks thoughtful, liberal rabbis from getting on board? Was it just 23andMe?
Well, that's much broader than just the sort of the...
Yeah, what is the blockage? I haven't talked to Ken about this again.
I think for many people, it's just a dark hole.
It's scary.
It's scary.
I mean, you
It's
go
scary.
on that line, you get the results back, and there's a lot of results given, and then there's 3 or 4 categories that are locked, like propensity to Parkinson's, a propensity to Alzheimer's, the BRCA gene, I guess, that they can
Right.
test for. And then you go through a list and say, you sure you want to know?
Look, it's the tree of knowledge. You partake of it, and you don't know what you're gonna find.
And I can tell you, when my kids went for a test on
I'm just thinking in sermons, guys.
Morning. So, 2 things about the answer with respect to non-Jews. The answer that you gave is terrific, and I'm blocking on which, but Irish, you mentioned, Italian Catholics are also prone to certain, and the best example I always give to people is Arab Rasiki, not a Jew, not a famous football coach at Notre Dame, grandchildren born at the demon pit, and because they're like 3rd or 4th on the list of movements in terms of the genetics. The question I have though is that this has been for a long time. It's been the Ashkenazi panel, right? So my question is, why are the words Ashkenazi and Sephardi not in here? Because I think it has been the situation that Ashkenazi have been much more comfortable doing this, takes sex over all the years, and we're just learning about certain neuromusculature and inflamed bowel syndrome and the other stuff that make up the Sephardi community. I would urge both those words to go into this.
And Persian, that's why we brought it up. We wanted
Especially
to.
where we are.
Right. And Persian.
And
Persian. It's the same thing as Sephardi.
Do you think it needs to say Jewish, Persian, Moroccan, whatever?
Yeah, well, the list is long.
You can't just say any, it says here, any Jewish.
I think if
More
specific.
Yeah.
Eastern European blood or
Right.
blood from Tehran or Morocco.
More something, what would be easy if we could send this out to all the rabbis on the board of rabbis?
Yeah, just send it to me.
Okay.
Oh, wonderful.
And
Great.
We want to get this
Genetic
to
testing
our-
required this since I was an ordained rabbi. And I had one person ever say, no way, Jose.
Exactly. All my children are gonna do it. It's like I'm so sold on it. You know, on the spirit of sermon material for the high holidays, I think there's a real great sermon
That's
material.
called Uvacharta B'chaim. It's pretty easy.
Well, it goes beyond that. If you take the broader view, I was in Israel a few weeks ago. Now, a good friend of mine, Mika Goodman, has this spiritual retreat called Ein Prat in the desert. And a big part of his spiritual retreat, in addition to learning Talmud, Torah, culture, poetry, and music, is physical health. And when Rabbi Jacobs spoke about enlarging the circle, why is a synagogue and a community not concerned about physical health? Why is that? Where is it written in the Talmud and in the Torah that physical health should not be part of a rabbi's sermon? Where is that written? And I see Rabbi Top nodding. And it's one of those things that is so easily forgotten because physical health it's not spiritual. So I see this subject under the guise of physical health. It's a physical issue. And it's scientific.
Not only because they're right, because I have to get to the gym more often. But firstly, thank you to you, David and Rob, for being involved and supporting this initiative, and I fully support this important initiative, and I've had a conversation with Sharon about it. I had a question just for a moment about the timing. The question is, because I think we are dealing with a lot of nervousness in the community about doing these testing. What am I going to find? What am I going to discover? Is it going to break up our relationship or our marriage or my relation that's leading to marriage? So one question is timing. Are we encouraging people before they get married or as they get serious in the dating process?
Well, that's the Orthodox way, right? That's thing in New York.
Well, it's in Dor Yeshar in New York. What they do is,
right.
And related to this, what they do is they do it as a couple. So you don't find out as an individual your results, but you find out if you together as a couple are fine.
Right.
In other words, so if one person's a carrier and the other person's not, they won't find that out. They'll just say you're fine.
But normally, I want to ask you this question: when they find out that there's a problem, what usually happens? They don't get married.
I don't. That's a good question. My wife and I, when we were dating, we actually got tested by Dor Yeshar, and Baruch Hashem, everything was fine. I don't know.
It's up to the couple.
When did you
Anecdotal information.
get tested? What point in dating? Not the first day?
Not the first day.
Before I see you. Before Coffee Bean. Before coffee. That's the guy whose time is precious. My time is so valuable.
My wife was entering dental school, so the most important thing was that my teeth were somewhat straight. I think we had started to get a little serious. I think we hadn't decided completely, but we were sort of serious.
I
don't know what would have happened had we gotten a result. I'm sorry.
What would have happened?
I don't know. I think it depends on what the results, came back and which disease it was. And also, as you said, thankfully we have medical technology nowadays to deal
That's the
with the
key
situation.
fact.
That's a very.
I was going to say, Tali is really good. I mean, we really scored her. So any questions you have, she's got tons of letters after her name. She's an expert, and she can really just nail any of your questions and any of your current questions. Just tell them to email her.
Might be worthwhile to consider this couple issue, because it doesn't single out either of them, because if one of them's a carrier, then there's no problem with the couple, but if each received individual results, then one might look down on the other, and maybe it could affect them.
You gotta know both anyway.
If it was just done as a couple.
Yeah. Well, that's the idea.
Apropos to that, there's been discussion and testing in the, let's say, Hillels College. Anyone over the age of 18 can be tested. Yeshiva University is offering testing to their students. So what we're really talking about is the single person getting tested before they enter a relationship. And they will know their facts. And I think we're talking about honesty. I think we're talking about individuality. This is part of the world.
Right, but ultimately it's the couple that counts, because you can have a small R, and if the wife has a big R, you're fine. So it's a question of what does she have, what does he have? So, like you said, it's all about the couple.
It's also about the parents and the grandparents. Now when people tell me their kids are getting married or something, I always say the first question is make sure they get tested. Because they're the nags. We have a great, nagging energy in this community.
Yeah.
And they'll make sure it gets done.
I'm sorry, you
I attended quite a few lectures at the UCLA Society for Genetics, and they spoke about many, of these issues. They have a brain project, for example, that a member of my family has been involved in as a patient. And genetic testing is very prominent in terms of whether a particular medication will be effective in the treatment of cancer. And I'm sure it's applicable to other diseases as well. But that's also an area which I think should be of importance. And also finding if certain diseases, not just Tay-Sachs or those, to do with the Sephardic community or the Ashkenazi community, but certain diseases like cancer or diabetes and other things that can really impair a person's life. If this is something that can be looked into. I know that the problems of insurance were big issues, and then there's the problem of expense, because it's very expensive. Does our health system cover these things? Because my son-in-law was part of the brain project. They picked up the costs, but the costs were very expensive, several $1,000.
Well, the cost, whatever the cost is, whether it's $250 that I've heard or $100 that I've heard, compared to the risk involved, it's not a bad deal.
Yeah, I'm Jeff. I'm a student at HUC. This is good information and obviously good for the family planning aspects of everything. But in terms of sermon writing materials, I feel like there's also a place to have a God conversation as rabbis in terms of even looking at. We just got finished talking about the nuns who have spiritual aspirations that we have a hard time connecting with. We're talking about literally life and death and choosing and getting in there and manipulating a process that some would argue on one side of the spectrum to be not natural, which has very much to do with God and how we interpret and understand God as a player in the game of our lives. And regardless of where you sit on that spectrum as spiritual leaders, that's another thing to potentially really bring up in this conversation, which hasn't been here.
Yeah, I think it's a great subject. I think it's a great subject. In fact, in many ways, God has been a key obstacle to getting people tested. Because from my culture, it's always in God's hands. So the other way to look at God is to say, God gave me the gift. God gave me the brain to figure out, solutions to problems. So am I being in God's image? Am I connecting with God in a closer way when I'm using the talent and the knowledge that He gave me to be able to prevent these kind of diseases? Or am I sort of getting farther from God by not leaving it in His or her hands?
The
So it's a
literal
great
definition
subject.
of koach
And it works both ways.
is to search for. Koach nefesh means to search out, to look for a soul.
It feels very secondary Eshman to me. I don't know. Very good.
Oh yeah, it's a good one.
Has anybody talked to
I wish
Jay
I was a
Brown?
rabbi.
Have you talked to Jay Date about this? Do they have an interest?
They don't want to touch it. Because it's about sex, but it's not sexy. They don't want to touch it.
And I really want to put this piece forward because in theory, you guys are here to sell us. And I'm feeling a little bit like I'm a sales pitch, I have to tell you, okay?
You are.
I understand.
You know what? I make
She's
no
got
bones
a
about
lot
it.
coming. Wait,
We
listen.
are absolutely
Hey,
selling you.
She's
to get
on her
people
way to
test.
a question.
All right.
Stop,
I
Dave.
smell it.
I get it. And you're absolutely right that there's no one in their right mind who should say, we didn't do this. I mean, this should be a no-brainer, except that it's not a no-brainer. So the pitch, and I have to tell you, is not, this is a good thing, you should do it, but what is it that's holding people back? And, Jews raise perfect children. We raise perfect families. This speaks about, this is like infertility. Jews don't talk about infertility. That's the Shanta. This means there's something, it comes across as there's an imperfection. So the pitch has to be that this is not imperfection. That this is who we are. And I do think there's that huge fear of the finances behind it. To say preventatively, I'm going to do something like in vitro, which is going to set aside this kind of money. I think you have to talk very upfront instead of euphemistically about there are solutions, there's ways to deal with it. Yeah, let them know what they are, because what you don't know is greater, more scary, more expensive, more of a hurdle than if you say.
When you get on the website, there's no euphemistic. Yeah,
But
I agree 100%.
But this notion that there's a stepping back is real, and I think that to really go beneath the surface and do the real kind of successful work that we would all in partnership be able to do, you have to go beneath the surface and just get going. I mean, I don't understand, having sat through a wonderful presentation from 23andMe. Look, I'm the non-science major, that's why I'm a rabbi. I don't get the difference between what 23andMe is testing and what Gene Test now is. And if I was talking to a young couple, who should I send them to? Who should I send them to? What should I test them? What's the difference?
Well, part of
First
it,
thing I want to say is everything you've said now is precisely the reason why the city has done nothing for 30 years. Because they've looked at these obstacles, they said, I'm going to run away from it. It's too complicated. But something happened last year when some foundation said, we're going to not give up on this anymore because of all those obstacles that you said. And I want to reassure you that when you get on the website, there's no euphemisms. It's all completely laid out, including
part of it
fine.
is just, it's not really a sales pitch as much as it's just people don't know. And there's not as much resistance as you think, but people just don't know. So 23andMe, like I said, it tests for saliva, it doesn't test for blood. Tay-Sachs not found this. The forms of Tay-Sachs are only tested for blood, not saliva. And 23andMe doesn't test for all these 19 obscure, relatively rare
But they
genetic
tested for a
diseases.
number of things. I remember that being
They
part of
test
the
for a lot of things, they
presentation.
don't test for this whole 19. This is under the Jewish
Yeah,
panel.
that's right.
It's an
So-
Ashkenazi Sephardic Jewish panel, and that's what you need to make sure you test for. But the main thing is you need a blood test. It's not a saliva test, and that has to be. And a lot of people, they just need to know that.
I'm
They're very different.
confused. We just talked a few minutes back about the importance of doing this testing for intermarried couples for people outside the Ashkenazi Sephardic realm. And now you're saying this test is focused on that realm, or not testing for the diseases of intermarried couples?
Well, it will it tests for all these diseases. If you're half Jewish, or if you're marrying somebody who's not Jewish, but they're Catholic, it'll look for those diseases in their family as well.
Irish, Jews,
Right.
We're ready to wrap up.
Yeah, okay.
We've been told to wrap up.
But please, any questions, go to the website.